Bill's keynote address today, why ringing the church bell 350 times might save the world, will address what we've learned about symbolic action and the chance that if we move fast enough, we may be able to do something about climate change.
I wrote the first book about climate change, The End of Nature, 20 years ago. And so I've gotten the chance to follow the global warming story from hypothesis, the idea that we were burning enough coal and gas and oil and hence putting enough carbon in the atmosphere to materially alter the climate. Got to follow that from hypothesis to, by 1995 or so, strong scientific consensus that this was a real and serious problem. To, in the last couple of years, and here's the part you may be less familiar with, to watch that consensus turn into a kind of panic, at least among the scientists who know the most about what's going on. The basic bottom line is that change is coming much more quickly and on a much larger scale than we had understood. In fact, last week, a major scientific report on climate change came out, the title of which was Climate Change Faster, Stronger, Sooner. Okay? So far, human beings have raised the temperature of the planet 1 degree Fahrenheit. We would not have said 20 years ago that that was going to be, we would have said that that would take us just to the threshold of the global warming era, that we'd be feeling the first effects, but they'd be small, and we'd be looking a few more degrees and hence a few more decades down the road for real change. We underestimated how finely balanced physically this planet was. Okay? We underestimated, in a sense, the real beauty and wonder of the stability of the world that we were born into. It hasn't taken much, 1 degree, to push it off its axis, as it were. And what we've begun to see are a series of very potent feedback loops that are amplifying this warming in dramatic ways. What do I mean? Last summer of 2007, okay? All of a sudden, the Arctic melted and melted very quickly. By the end of the melting season of the summer of 2007, there was 25% less ice than we'd ever seen in the Arctic before. It's as if, as one scientist said, the ice just fell off a cliff. It happened 50 or 60 years ahead of what the computer forecasts had suggested would be the pace of that melt. It was repeated this summer. In fact, for this summer, for several weeks, both the northwest and northeast passages were wide open. You could circumnavigate the Arctic on open water for the first time, certainly in the history of Homo sapiens as a species, okay? And probably far longer than that. If we're going to prevent it happening, it turns out we're going to have to make larger change than we would have anticipated even a few years ago. One of the good things that we have this year is a number, a target, a deeper understanding of how God's world works. Jim Hansen from NASA, our greatest climatologist, took the results of things like that rapid melt of the Arctic sea ice, and they correlated them with all the paleoclimatic data that we have now assembled from glacial histories, from geological record, on and on and on. And they published a paper at the American Geophysical Union in San Francisco last December that finally gave us a number for how much is too much, for where the red line is. They said any value for carbon dioxide in the atmosphere greater than 350 parts per million, this is the only number I'm asking you to remember, 350 parts per million, was not compatible with the civilization that we have developed or with those conditions to which life on Earth is adapted. Strong words in a scientific paper, but quite powerful. That number, 350, is a new fact about our planet, a new fact about the boundary conditions for living on this Earth. It's very useful to have, and it's very painful to have, because it's an extremely tough number. We are already past it. The atmospheric concentration of CO2 at the moment is 387 parts per million, rising 2 parts per million per year. Okay? As it turns out, the world is in the middle of negotiating the next treaty the successor to the Kyoto protocols that the U.S. shamefully never signed on to. Okay? That negotiation is supposed to conclude in December of next year in Copenhagen. If it was concluded now, or the way the politics are now in the world, the treaty would be remarkably insufficient. In fact, it would guarantee that we would not act soon enough to ever get back to that 350 parts per million level. It would lock us in to a kind of slow and unhappy warming. So our job, I think, is to figure out how to change the political conditions in the next year around the world to allow far greater progress. And this, of course,